Horizon Chance from Reaction. This is Suleiman the Magnificent, hero of all that is. Extra history part 1, well, it's an extra credits. A young Suleiman ascends the throne of the Ottoman Empire. He wants to be benevolent ruler, but he must prove that he is no pushover. Yeah, I think this is, I reacted to the Ottoman Empire from Orisa production. In that I learned that Suleiman the Magnificent is where the Ottoman Empire peaked, I guess, right? And he was called magnificent not by his own people or himself, but by his enemy or something. I mean, how badass you have to be that your even enemies acknowledge this. So it's going to be a fun video. Remember people, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe so I know which type of videos to react to more. Check out the reaction, there's a link in the description. Check out the cast for different playlists like history, Orisa production, Cuz Gazar in nutshell, real life lore. Yeah, let's watch it.
A man stands on the banks of the Bosphorus, watching the flow of its waters. The past echoes through him. He had once heard of a great emperor of the Romans, a lawgiver, a conqueror, a defender of the faith, a builder of temples to exalt himself and his god, a man who married a courtesan and shared with her a glorious reign, an emperor who dreamed of an empire that stretched to the farthest horizons. Was not he, Suleiman, also all of these things? But where was that dreamer's empire now? It was underneath his feet. Did he not stand in that man's beloved city? Had that man's great cathedral not been converted into his mosque? Would this Ottoman Empire too one day end up as ghosts of the past, as stories and as monuments? He was not sleeping well.
Damn. Okay, so existential crisis hit him, I guess. He thought about Justinian, like how he did all that shit, right? And how he dreamt of an empire which he acquired. And obviously, after that, they went away too because Ottomans basically took over the place. But now he's having the crisis like, okay, just like that happened to the Byzantines, it's happening to Ottomans now. Because where is that empire and everything? Damn, that is something heavy, right? I mean, it just hit him like, regardless of how great ruler you are, regardless of, how great empire you make, it can't last.
His mind had been troubled of late. He longed for the counsel of his old friend, Ibrahim. Standing on the banks of the Bosphorus, he remembers. He remembers the swift rider, the man on the tall horse who came to Manisa to tell him that his father was dead. He had considered this moment time and again, yet now that it was here, he didn't know how to feel. His father was Salim the Stern, capable, ruthless, arrogant, a terror to his advisors, with the slightest misstep meaning execution. But he'd also been a boon to the empire, pushing its borders further than any sultan before him. In the reckoning of the West, it was 1520, but to him it was the year 925. He was 25 years old, born in 900, and he was about to become the 10th sultan, born at the very beginning of the 10th century, an auspicious sign. He called for Ibrahim, his childhood friend, a Greek, a Christian, and a slave. They would take the fastest horses to Istanbul, where his father's death was being kept a secret, lest rebellion occur in the absence of a ruling sultan. As they thundered down the dusty roads of Anatolia, he had time to think of his nation and his future. At least there would be no civil war. His father had spared him and the empire that when he murdered all of his brothers. His reign would at least start in peace. For 8 days they...
Oh yeah, Ottomans did that, right? I forgot that. Holy shit. I mean, they killed the siblings as a law or something, right? So there is no, power vacuum or power grab, something like that. Imagine, growing up in that royal family, right? Okay, you could be the next sultan. You are the, kid now and you have these brothers. Then, someday you realize like, okay, there's a law like this. And then you look at your brothers like, holy shit, one of us is going to kill every other one. And only one will left. Or, maybe the state will do it or something because it's a law.
Rode hard, and for 8 days he planned. He discussed with Ibrahim how they would lay the foundation for his rule, and how together they would navigate the Byzantine waters of Istanbul. Then they arrived. He was back in the shining city, the sublime gate. Within moments, he was surrounded by guards and functionaries. Barely off his horse, he was led to the tomb of Eyüp, the burial place of Muhammad's standard-bearer, and perhaps the most sacred site in all of Istanbul. Then came in the Mevlevi Sharif, who walked up to him and, about his waist, girt the golden sword of Osman. And so he was tied to the prophet and to the founder of his house, and he was made sultan. With the rising of the sun the next day, he received the highest officials in the palace to pay him homage. Then he followed his father's bier to his final resting place, and there he decreed, as his first act as Sultan, that a mosque should be built around his father's grave. He would honor his father. He would remind the world of the strength of his house, but he would also show them that he was his own man. The fear that they knew under his father would not persist. He gave a large donative to the Janissary Corps, that elite infantry that formed the backbone of the Sultan's army.
Yeah, so there are, many types of rulers. One of them, obviously, like his father, who just rules in terror, right? Usually that kind of thing doesn't last because rebellions happen. But if you're making progress, right? First of all, in Ottoman Empire, religion is pretty tied up to the, being a sultan and everything, royalty. That's the case with even Christian countries, but it's, really tied to this because, like he said, he's supposed to be, I don't know, lineage of the prophet or something because after giving the sword. So it's pretty hard to, rebel against that, like you're rebelling against the prophet or something like that. So rebellions cannot be that widespread, but still they take real measures like killing their siblings and things like that as a law to make sure that doesn't happen. But even in the end, it's all technicalities. People could still rebel, right? If they're seeing like guys just ruthless, just kills people, if the people just looks at him funny or something like that. But if the guy is actually expanding the empire and is good for the empire overall, people are not going to rebel even if you're gruesome. So that's one way to rule it. I guess he's going to rule in, the best way there is to rule. And throughout the history, if you look at the best rulers they were like this, right? Being more commonsensical, not ruthless, being more political, helping out the people who are closest to you or the empire, right? People who runs the empire, people who are crucial to the empire, right? Helping out the people, showing them, okay, I'm your sultan and I'm going to reward you with things if you help me and help this Ottoman Empire and things like that. So, that's the best way to rule, right? Not by terror, not by anything stupidity, rewarding your own people and giving incentive to people. That's what it's going to do, I guess.
And served as his personal guard. But he gave to the officials and the functionaries as well.
There you go.
He pardoned some, allowed those who his father had compelled by force to come to Istanbul to return to their homes, lifted a much-hated prescription against the sale of Iranian goods. Everyone would know it was a new era.
Yeah.
But as he had discussed with Ibrahim, he could not let his new benevolence be mistaken for weakness. And so the executions began. Not many, and none he believed to be unjust, just enough to let those in the court know that the House of Osman was still ruled by a tiger, and not a lamb. But his rule wouldn't go unchallenged. Barely had he taken the sword when revolt erupted in Syria. The governor of Syria marched on Aleppo, thinking he had the support of the Bey, or governor of Egypt.
Yeah, so obviously that's also the element of it, right? If you rule like that, rule, good, I guess, by rewarding people, giving people incentive, right? People think you're soft and rewards happen. I mean, that's understandably, understandably situation that happens. But that's just some people are trying to revolt because they think they can seize the power, right? They are in that position. It's, few revolts here and there is easier to, I guess, clamp down and make an example. But ruling like the way he's planning here is the way to go. And that's why he became Suleiman the Magnificent, I guess.
Egypt, a province newly added to the empire under Suleiman's father Salim. But the Bey of Egypt was a crafty man, and instead sent word to the Sultan of what was going on, all the while plotting to support whoever won the conflict, and to claim he'd supported them all along. But Suleiman saw in this opportunity as much as danger. He marshaled his armies and marched with overwhelming force to crush the revolt in the south. He showed the entire Islamic world that he was not a man to be trifled with, that his armies were as vast as the sea, and his resolve as uncompromising. He would be benevolent to the loyal, and merciless where disloyalty met him. Perhaps that's where it all began. He shakes his head and walks along the shore. And then a smile touches his lips, remembering those first heady days, planning with Ibrahim. With his southern territories secure, he could start planning his real dream. Where his father had expanded south, he would bring the empire north, into Europe. Late into the night, he would pore over maps with Ibrahim, who was now falconer to the Sultan. They would discuss in depth the powers of Europe, but their conversations always returned to 2 points: Belgrade and Rhodes. After the fall of the Byzantines, the Kingdom of Hungary alone stood as the bulwark of Europe, preventing Ottoman expansion north and west, and Belgrade stood as the gate to that bulwark. If Belgrade fell, the path to Eastern Europe would lay wide open for the armies of the Sultan. But Belgrade also served as a reminder of a national shame. In 1456, the Ottomans had tried to take the great fortress at Belgrade, only to suffer a complete and humiliating defeat. The Christians in Europe still struck their bells at noon to celebrate such a triumph, mocking the great empire to the east with each peal. He, Suleiman, would undo this shame, and in doing so, open the way to Europe. But there was another thorn in his empire: roads. The eastern Mediterranean should be an Ottoman lake, with commerce and transport flowing freely and safely through its waters. But with the Knights of Rhodes doggedly holding on to the island in its center, serving as a harbor and a safe haven for Christian corsairs, his people would never know peace on the sea. His trade, especially the all-important...
That is seriously surprising, right? It's awesome. This is entirely dominated by Ottomans. Only one island is controlled by somebody, and they are actually keeping it controlled. I mean, if you're surrounded by enemy at that scale, it's surprising how you can keep it.
Important trade from Egypt was threatened, and naval campaigns to the west were severely hampered by this Christian fortress clinging to a rock in his sea. For 75 years, sultans had tried to wrest control of this tiny island from the Christians, and each time they'd been repulsed. But where they had failed, he must succeed. His dream of a European empire could never be realized without control of this strategic island. But even as he planned, the war he desired came to him. The Kingdom of Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, despite continuous border raids, were theoretically at peace, but the terms of this peace involved an annual tribute to the Sultanate. This year, upon hearing of a new sultan in the empire, instead of sending tribute, the brash Hungarian prince had the Ottoman envoy executed. Suleiman was furious.
So now I'm kind of understanding why his father was so fucked up, right? Killing everybody left and right, because to him it was the political thing to do. Because he basically showed the world how fucked up and gruesome he is, right? Empires like Hungary and everybody, to keep them at bay and keep them on leash, I guess. That is why he was like that. And when his son came along, right, Suleiman the Magnificent, being all this generous, right, rewarding to people, world probably saw that as being soft, like, okay, the kid is nothing, right, it's just soft, we can crush him immediately. Hungary probably thought that and declared war, obviously, by killing the envoy and everything. The revolt happened in the Ottoman Empire because everybody thought that he's soft. That is a real disadvantage of being like that, right, being good, gracious, rewarding. People would revolt, but it's a pretty short revolt at the long span of the empire he might have, right? At the earlier times, things like this would happen. But if you crush them, right, you show the world that you are that powerful, but you are also generous. Overall, that's good for the, growth of the empire.
He had surprised everyone in court, all the foreign dignitaries, with his gentler rule. He had shown that he wasn't weak, but from this thin, pale lover of poetry and music, this tame lion, as they all thought of him, they hadn't yet seen wrath. Well, now they would see it. Now Hungary would see it. Now the world would see the Sultan's rage. Raise the horsetail banners. No one executes his citizens. No one insults his dignity. The empire is going to war. Quietly, looking out at the waves, he remembered the secret feeling of elation that had come with his anger. His mind started to drift to war to come.
Damn. Yeah, we know that, he's going to be badass because his enemy named him Suleiman the Magnificent, right? We know he made sure the Ottoman reached his peak during his time. Obviously, after that, it's just downhill. But Ottoman Empire at its peak was really powerful. So I guess that's his rule. That's where he's going to go from now on. But earlier times, obviously, as soon as he came to the throne, this happens a lot whenever some new king rises up. Right, some new kid takes the throne. People think that he might not be the same as the previous guy, so we can basically take advantage of him or even crush him. So yeah, times like that, people has to show like how strong they are. Like Suleiman will probably do it here. Yeah. Alright, well, that was Suleiman the Magnificent, hero of all that is, by the channel Extra Credits. This was fun, man. It's gonna be really great to react to the whole series, because I'm pretty sure that as the series progresses, by the second or third episode, it's gonna reach its peak, and we're gonna see how badass Suleiman is. If you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the Rick's and there's a link in the description. Check out the cast over, check out the end cards, and yeah, I'll see you next time.